Good morning, folks. Kwanzaa here. I am kind of speechless, which isn't necessarily the norm for me. I usually have something to say about most things, and this week, in light of so much that has taken place, um, specifically the murder of George Floyd, I just found myself kind of having to take a step back and just really pause and to take the information in small doses and process it. Um, because the other day, I guess maybe the other day, I wanted to say something, but I realized that it wasn't coming from a place of peace. It was actually coming from a place of anger and frustration, incredible sadness, and I didn't want to put that kind of energy out into the world. But I also didn't want to acknowledge what was happening either. But I knew that I would say something. I just didn't know when, and I didn't know uh, I didn't know how. One of my favorite quotes of all time comes from Ralph Ellison, and he says, know that on a lower frequency, I speak for you. And so, Babe and I were talking this morning. We were talking obviously about, the state of the world and everything that's going on, talking specifically about George Floyd and, the murder of him and, all the protests and everything that happened as a result of that. Um, and it reminded me that, I don't know if reminded, it compelled me to say something. And one of the things I know they were talking about, it was a hashtag, we are not, or yeah, we are not okay. And the guy was giving a press conference yesterday, and he was, he was talking about that. And I think it was yesterday or the day before. And I apologize because these days are really all over the place. But he used the hashtag or he used the words "we are not okay," and I noticed that kind of hashtag was trending a bit. I don't know if trending is the right word, but it was like the sound bite from what he was talking about that really had people kind of stirred in people's spirits. But then there was also this thing that I shared. It was like a video that a lot of celebrities collaborated together or collaborated to do this video, and they were talking about someday. And I shared that. But this morning, I woke up thinking about this theme or this idea that we are not okay. And in my book, Reflections of a Life Well Lived, I actually had a chapter that I wrote that's entitled "We Are Not Okay." And after talking with Babies, when I was like, I'm gonna go back and read that chapter to see if it held in it the same sentiments that we're experiencing today. And I was surprised. I'm going to read an excerpt for you guys, but I was surprised to read that it in fact, it did. It kind of held the same sentiments. And it was kind of eerie because obviously this came before any of this, um, anything, the pandemic and all of that. Um, so it was just kind of eerie that this is what I wrote. I'm just going to read a little excerpt from it, from my chapter in Reflections of a Life Well Lived, entitled "We Are Not Okay." Now, mind you, this book was actually, completed and written last year, end of last year, and went into print earlier this year. So I think I went into print either late February or early March. But in any case, this was before any of this was happening. Um, and so the chapter, "We Are Not Okay," and I put a quote at the beginning of each chapter. So I'll read the chapter title, read the quote, and then go into the text. So "We are not okay. Where there is only a choice between cowardice and violence, I would advise violence." And that's Mahatma Gandhi. Comedian Gerard Carmichael opened his 2017 HBO stand-up 8 with the question, "Are we going to be okay?" The audience seems to ponder the question as the auditorium goes silent. Meanwhile, I laughed hysterically because I didn't expect him to open his set with such a serious question. I don't know about you, but I find comedians funnier when they are trying to be serious. I can never ask the question in a comedic way that Gerard asked it. Face serious, no indication that a joke will follow. And whenever I try to emulate Gerard, I find myself laughing or at a minimum smirking as I try to recite the lines in the same seriousness. For me, the comedy isn't in a question because the question isn't funny. The comedy is in the way that he asks the question. Looking across the landscape of the world, poverty, injustice, greed, hatred, and the like, I also wonder if we're going to be okay. I believe every generation has seen their share of troubles, and I'm sure to each generation the issues that they face seem irreparable. Likewise, the problems that we see in this generation seem vast and insurmountable. Of course, as a Christian, I'm taught to be encouraged in the faith in the face of trials. The Lord reminds us to count it all joy when you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. And let perseverance finish its work so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything. That's James 1 2 to 4. I have complete faith in God and the overcoming and conquering power that He has placed in His saints. But I have to tell you, it has been exhausting. I am hopeful that we will be okay one day. But right now, if Gerard were to ask me if we're going to be okay, I would respond decidedly, no, we are not okay. But we can be. Yeah. So that's just the beginning of that chapter, just a little snippet of that chapter. And I'm trying to see if there was another part that I wanted to share, but I think I'll leave it there. I think I'll leave it there. So closing out that, it says I have to, let me say, yeah, it says I am hopeful that we will be okay one day. But right now, if Gerard were to ask me if we are okay, I will respond decidedly, no, we are not okay, but we can be. Um, I was going to read more, but I think I'm going to stop there because I think the point that I want to pull from there, and I think the point that has kept me maybe quiet over these past few days, the point that I really focused on is this level of hopefulness. I think that we have to remain hopeful. Um, I have to remain hopeful. Um, I think there is a certain energy that has to be put out in the world. Um, and I think everybody understanding their part and understanding their position, and I understand my position is to speak life, is to encourage hope, is uh, to really, I think, be level-headed and level-minded. I think that is my strength. That is my superpower, if you will. That I am able to, ascend above the noise. I think that is honestly just a gift. Everybody does not have it. Some people are consumed by the noise. They are drug into the noise. And when I talk about the noise, it really is about um, having a level of, like, people are emotional, and it is natural to be emotional. I was emotional, but I think that you have to deal with the emotions and process your emotions in order to maintain some level of hope. Um, and I think that is one of the gifts that my faith gives me. My faith gives me, in spite of everything else, it gives me hope. And I talk about, having hope you know, in the power of God, and having hope in the overcoming power that God has placed in us as believers. There is no other way for me to approach this, there's no other way for me to approach the times that we are in on so many levels. In my book, I talk about specifically, there being this virus of a pandemic, proportion. And the virus that I'm talking about is, the sense of hopelessness, um, uh, this sense of greed, this sense of carelessness, this sense of selfishness, all of these different things that is really plaguing, our society, plaguing the world. And when you're putting that kind of energy out, no matter what level, it connects and it builds up. And it's almost like a tornado, that it starts off and it picks up momentum and it picks up speed as it collects, all of these other particles and all these other pieces, and it brings it together. And it is the collection of all of that that makes the tornado more deadly. And so if you can imagine a tornado, spiraling and beginning, yeah, it's the wind of it, the energy behind it that gets the initial thing going. But it is the momentum that it picks up as it collects all these other particles. And I'm very visual, so that's how I see all of this. I see it as if I see it as this one thing that started to spin out of control, and it's picking up momentum because so many people are gravitating towards it. My background is in public relations, and one of the things that I learned, as I studied public relations, and one of the things that I tried to practice, which is really difficult to do, like I just did it, and I'm going to tell you what I just did. Um, it's difficult to talk positive to a situation that, like, appears negative. It's difficult to, so what I just did was, I said that, that it's hard to do something. Um, when the reality is, when I say the word hard, it only adds to the negativity. So you have to even look for positive words. I guess is my point. You have to even look for positive words to describe a negative situation. Um, and so instead of using words like this is crazy, this is difficult, this is, you know, I just choose to say I'm hopeful. And that is my response to everything that we are experiencing in this season, is that I am hopeful. Um, I am hopeful. I'm hopeful that something is going to continue to turn this thing into a positive. And I have this theory, and I'm on here way longer than I thought. I have this theory. I actually was sharing it with my class last summer. We were talking about this thing about God and evil was the name of the class, and it was really set out to answer this age-old question: if God is real, then why is the world so evil? And that's a question that a lot of people wrestle with. Believers, non-believers. It's like the big question that atheists ask. And it's kind of the question that they really hang their hats on, is that if God is good and if God is sovereign, if God is omnipotent, if he's, all these things, why is there so much evil in the world? That's the question, right? And my response to that, because everyone has their theories, or what we call a theology. So everyone has their theology. And my theology with regards to that question is that everybody has a choice. Like, everybody has a choice. And even in this situation, um, everybody had a choice. And I think that God uses different situations, that not that he creates situations to stir up anything, but he uses different situations to give everybody the opportunity to do the right thing. And in our ability to recognize and identify what the right thing is, and then to do it, it is in that we are justified. It is in that we grow and we mature and we become more solid and more anchored. Not just in our faith. In that chapter, I talk about how not everybody is interested in being Christian, and that's a part of the problem. But I think to the degree where people make good decisions, even in the face of what seems like an impossible situation, when you make good decisions, that is what will turn all of this negativity around. I just believe that. Um, and I'm hopeful. I remain hopeful. I remain hopeful. Um, there's so much more I wanted to say, but I don't want this video to be long and drawn out. But if I can just leave you guys with anything, you know, just speak life, to the world. Um, Remain hopeful, you know, continue to pray, don't lose sight of, and then understanding your position. Like, I know that there are people who have been called to the front lines of this. There are people who, like my husband, his voice is because of the mantle and the ministry that he does through keeping our sons alive. Like, it is necessary for him to speak to this thing, in a volume much louder than mine, um, because of my ministry and my mantle. I know that it is my purpose to continue to encourage people in the faith. Um, yeah, is our responsibility to my responsibility to continue to encourage people in the faith. And so while there are people who are for sure in the front lines, I think, law enforcement for sure, having to deal with each other and having to take a step back and reevaluate that, that code, that brotherhood, whatever, brother slash sisterhood, having to step back, because I think we have to be careful. And this is what I was telling Babe, and again, way too long, but I think we have to be careful to not villainize um, all law enforcement, because they're not the enemy. It may be hard to say and people don't necessarily want to hear it, but we have to be careful not to villainize law enforcement, because they're not the enemy. People are people, no matter uh, what careers they choose or what they decide to do, in life. People are people, and until they deal with their heart issues, because this is a heart issue, until they deal with their heart issues, they will continue to show up in whatever environment they are, um, and act in a way that is not beneficial to the masses. And we see that time and time again. But like I said, this video was way longer than I expected. I continue to pray for you guys. I continue to pray for our world. Um, I continue to pray that God heals our souls. And when I talk about souls, I'm talking about like our hearts, our mind, our emotions, that God heal us so that we can heal this land, like, because that's what's needed. Again, I love you guys. Continue to speak life, continue to remain hopeful, continue to encourage our babies, our young children coming up. Um, so much more I can say about this, guys, but I will digress, and I will just end this video with, God bless us. God bless us all. Love you guys so much. Blessings.